Have you ever felt like you were speaking a language that nobody else in the room understood? Not a literal language, but a way of processing the world that just fell out of sync with everyone around you. Maybe you're the person who needs 3 days to recover after one social event. Or perhaps you're the one who sees patterns and vibes while everyone else is just looking at facts and figures. For a long time, I felt that feeling of being different was actually a sign that something was broken. I spent years trying to force my brain to operate in a way that felt like wearing shoes 2 sizes too small. It's an exhausting way to live, constantly translating your true self into a version that's acceptable to the public. But then I stumbled across 4 simple letters. At first, it felt like a parlor trick or a digital horoscope designed to make me feel special. But as I read the description of my personality type, the hair on my arms stood up. It wasn't just accurate, it was like someone had been ghosting my internal monologue for a decade. For the first time, I didn't feel like a weird version of a normal person. I felt like a perfectly normal version of myself. Today, we're going to look at why that happens and why these 16 labels are more than just a quiz. To understand why those descriptions feel so personal, we have to look at the 4 dichotomies. Think of these not as boxes you're trapped in, but as mental handedness. Just like being right-handed or left-handed, you can use both, but one feels natural. The first pillar is extroversion, E, versus introversion, I, which is simply about energy. Do you recharge by interacting with the outer world or by retreating into your inner world? Next, we have sensing, S, versus intuition, N, which is how you take in information. Sensors focus on the now, the concrete, the physical, and the proven data. Intuitives focus on the next, the patterns, the possibilities, and the hidden meanings. Then there's thinking, T, versus feeling, F, which is your decision-making filter. Thinkers prioritize logic, consistency, and objective truth when a problem arises. Feelers prioritize harmony, values, and the impact a decision has on people. Finally, we have judging, J, versus perceiving, P, which is your lifestyle preference. Judgers love closure, lists, and a predictable plan to navigate their day. Perceivers prefer to keep their options open, acting on spontaneity and flexibility. When you combine these 4 preferences, you get one of 16 unique operating systems. It's a map of your cognitive default settings before the world told you who you be. I remember sitting in a high-pressure corporate meeting a few years ago. Everyone around the table was shouting out data points, deadlines, and bottom-line numbers. To them, the project was a series of checkboxes that needed to be ticked by Friday. But in my head, I wasn't seeing checkboxes. I was seeing a giant, interconnected web of consequences. I could see how this one small change would frustrate our customers 3 months from now. I tried to explain it, but the words felt clumsy, like I was trying to describe a color they couldn't see. "You're overthinking it," one manager told me with a dismissive wave. "Just focus on the task in front of you," another said. I walked out of that room feeling like I was failing at being a professional. I felt slow, disconnected, and honestly, a little bit stupid. It wasn't until I understood my MBTI type that I realized I wasn't slow. I was an intuitive in a room full of sensors. I wasn't failing to see the facts. I was naturally programmed to see the implications of those facts. That realization didn't just change my career, it changed how I treated myself. Suddenly, I stopped apologizing for the way my brain was wired to function. Now, this is where most people get the MBTI wrong. They think they're just 4 letters, like a permanent barcode on their forehead. But the real magic happens when we look at the cognitive functions. This is the engine under the hood of your 4-letter type. Carl Jung, the psychologist who inspired the MBTI, believed we don't just think or feel. He believed we do these things in either an
introverted or extroverted way. Every type has a stack of 4 functions they use most often. Your dominant function is your superpower. It's what you do without even trying. Then you have an auxiliary function, which acts like a co-pilot to balance you out. If your first function is an observing one, your second will be a judging one. This balance is what keeps us mentally healthy and grounded. For example, an INFJ doesn't just intuit, they use introverted intuition, NI. This means they process internal patterns and gut feelings deeply. But they balance that with extroverted feeling, FE, which helps them connect with others. Understanding your stack explains why 2 introverts can act completely differently. One might be lost in a world of logical systems, while the other is lost in a world of sensory beauty. It's not just about what you are, it's about how your mind moves through information.
Deep down, we all have this primal fear of being a glitch in the system. We want to believe that there's a reason we think the way we do. When we find our 4-letter code, it's like finding a tribe we didn't know existed. It's the relief of searching a forum and seeing someone else describe your exact inner struggle. Wait, you also replay conversations in your head for 3 hours after they end? You also feel a physical ache when a room is disorganized? Suddenly, the weird things about you aren't flaws, they're features of your model. Psychologically, this is called social identity theory. We crave categories because they help us navigate the social world without losing our minds. They give us a shorthand to explain ourselves to the people we love. Instead of saying, I'm being difficult, you can say, I just need some introvert time to process. It turns a personal conflict into a technical adjustment. It's not just a label, it's a bridge between your internal world and the external one.
Now, I have to be honest with you. Many psychologists hate the MBTI. They argue it isn't hard science because it relies on self-reporting. There's also a psychological phenomenon called the Barnum Effect. This is the tendency to believe a personality description is tailored specifically to you, even if it's actually filled with vague, universal traits that apply to everyone. You have a great deal of unused capacity which you have not turned to your advantage. See? That sounds like you, but it also sounds like every human being on Earth. Standard psychology prefers the Big 5 model, which measures traits on a spectrum. It tracks things like neuroticism and conscientiousness with more statistical rigor. But the Big 5 tells you how you behave. The MBTI tries to tell you why. Even if the MBTI isn't a perfect clinical instrument, it works as a mental model. It's a framework for self-reflection and understanding cognitive diversity. If a tool helps you understand your blind spots, is it still pseudoscience? Maybe, but in the real world, a map doesn't have to be a satellite photo to be useful. It just needs to help you find your way home without getting lost in your own head.
I remember the day I stopped trying to be organized in the traditional sense. I had spent my whole life surrounded by people who used planners like religious texts. They had color-coded tabs, hourly schedules, and a strange love for filing cabinets. Every time I tried to do that, I felt like a failure by Tuesday afternoon. My desk was a mess, my to-do list was a suggestion, and I felt constantly guilty. Then, I read about the perceiving P trait and how it processes the world. It wasn't that I was lazy, it was that I thrived on open-loop systems. I didn't need a rigid box, I needed a flexible framework that allowed for a flow state. The moment I accepted that, the guilt just evaporated into the air. I stopped buying planners I knew I would never use. Instead, I started building systems that actually worked for my messy brain. That's the power of this framework. It gives you permission to be who you already are. It's the aha moment when you realize your weakness is just a mismanaged strength.
Now, have you ever felt like you completely lost control of your personality? In psychology, this is often called being in the grip. It's what happens when your dominant functions are exhausted and your shadow takes over. This usually involves your inferior function, the weakest part of your cognitive stack. If you're a logical thinker, T, your shadow might be an explosion of irrational emotion. If you're an organized judger, J, you might suddenly become reckless and impulsive. It's like your brain's circuit breaker flipping because the load is too heavy. Understanding this flip is vital for stress management and self-awareness. Instead of beating yourself up for acting out of character, you see it as a signal. Your brain is telling you that your primary way of functioning is depleted. The shadow isn't an enemy, it's a backup generator that's a bit rusty from disuse. By recognizing these patterns, you can catch yourself before the grip takes hold. It transforms a mental breakdown into a cognitive recalibration.
Once you start seeing the world through these 16 lenses, something strange happens. You stop being so angry at the people who aren't like you. I used to get so frustrated with my friend who could never make a firm plan. Why can't you just pick a restaurant by Thursday? I think, feeling disrespected. But after learning about the perceiving P trait, I realized it wasn't about me. To them, a firm plan felt like a prison cell. They wanted to stay open to the best option. It wasn't a lack of care, it was a different way of experiencing time and opportunity. Suddenly, that friction turned into a conversation instead of a Cold War. I know you like to stay flexible, but I need a tentative spot by noon. It's like finally getting the user manual for the people in your life. You stop expecting a fish to climb a tree, and you stop being mad when it can't. This is the social bridge, the moment personality theory becomes empathy. It allows us to forgive the flaws in others because we finally see the wiring.
At the end of the day, the MBTI isn't a destination, it's a starting point. The danger of any personality test is using it as a cage rather than a compass. I'm an INTJ, so I can't be empathetic, or I'm an ENFP, so I'll never be organized. That's not psychology, that's an excuse for stagnation. True growth happens when you use your 4 letters to identify your growth edges. If you know you're a thinker, T, you can consciously practice checking in with people's feelings. If you're a perceiver, P, you can build small anchor habits to keep your life from drifting. The goal isn't to be a perfect stereotype of your type. The goal is to become a well-rounded version of your unique configuration. Carl Jung called this process individuation. It's the journey of integrating all the parts of yourself, even the ones that feel weak. You are a complex, evolving human being, not a static result on a browser tab. Use the letters to understand your past, but don't let them dictate your future. Because the most misunderstood person in your life shouldn't be you.